Hi Katie.
Hi Alex.
It's great to meet up with you here on Mozart Snapshots again.
Thanks, it's great to see you too, as always.
So what are we doing today?
Today we're going to do something rather special and go for a ride in a horse and carriage, or a Fiaker as they're called here in Salzburg. And we are going to ride down the Hellbrunner Allee, which is the oldest preserved manorial avenue in Central Europe, dating back to the year 1615, and a man named Marcus Siticus.
Marcus Siticus, the Archbishop with a special sense of humor.
That's right, Marcus Siticus of Schloss Hellbrunn, complete with their special Wasserspiele.
Wolfgang traveled frequently in horse-drawn carriages.
He actually traveled all over Europe in horse-drawn carriages because you have to remember, in the second half of the 1700s, there were no cars, there were no trains or planes, and so basically the only means of land transportation was a horse and carriage.
And did the Mozarts own their own carriage?
They did indeed, because during Wolfgang's first concert tour in 1762, he and his sister Maria Anna were invited to perform for Hungarian aristocracy in a town called Pressburg. And while they were in Pressburg in December of 1762, Leopold had the bright idea to purchase a Haydn carriage for nur 23 Dukaten.
A Haydn carriage?
Yes, as in Joseph and Michael Haydn, because the Haydn family had actually been in the cartwright business for more than 2 generations, and they had somewhat of a monopoly on the entire business. That is, until Empress Maria Theresa decided to put an end to that, saying that no one family could have a monopoly on any business.
How much did Mozart actually travel?
In all, he was on the road for a third of his life. So he was gone for a total of 3,720 days, which totals up to 10 years, 2 months, and 2 days. And over the course of all those travels, he saw more than 10 countries and visited more than 200 cities, towns, and places.
And where did Wolfgang's very first travels take him?
His very first trip took him to Munich in 1762. That was a success, and so the next travel took them to Vienna.
And how long did it take them to travel from Salzburg to Vienna?
Well, you know, today we can get from Salzburg to Vienna in about 2.5 hours by train. But it took them 3 weeks, and the entire journey lasted nearly 4 months because they made a lot of stops along the way. However, when they did finally arrive in Vienna, little Wolfgang took out his violin and in the customs office, and he charmed the customs officials so much that they let the family's baggage pass through without inspection.
Lustig. But these trips must have been expensive?
Yes, at first they put the family into considerable debt, in spite of the fact that the trips was underwritten by Archbishop Schrattenbach as well as by Mozart's friend and landlord, Lorenz Hagenauer. However, they were so successful that after a few concerts during this trip, Leopold was able to bring home the equivalent of 2 years' salary. So anyway, now I think we should go on a ride in this beautiful horse-drawn carriage, and we will talk a little bit later with Franz Winter, who is the head of the Winter Fiaker Unternehmer, which has been in the business for more than 100 years.
Let's go inside. This is a beautiful carriage, but it must have been very cold in here in the winter.
Oh, it was freezing in the winter, and of course the Mozarts all got sick, and probably not infrequently. And that was a problem because when Wolfgang and Nanel were sick, they couldn't give concerts, and so of course no concerts meant no income for the family.
Was the travel schedule demanding?
It was. The travel days were quite long, and they often arrived late at night, and so of course that meant that they had to eat late at night. And remember, in those days the water was also not very clean, and so consequently not only were they eating late at night, but the kids were drinking beer and wine quite late at night, and then they had to get up early in the morning to often be on the road by dawn, and so it was really quite demanding.
A lot of things could go wrong traveling in the horse and carriage. Something could happen to the horse, or wheels could break.
And exactly that did happen. On the very first day of their grand tour of Western Europe, a wheel broke.
What a start. So what did they do?
Somehow or other, they managed to find a replacement wheel. It was unfortunately a little bit smaller, and so that made the carriage off-balanced. And so as not to overload the off-balanced carriage, Leopold and his valet, Sebastian Winter, actually walked the rest of the day, while Wolfgang, his mother and sister, and the baggage carried on in the carriage.
Poor guys. And did they have any major accidents?
Yes. On the way to Rome in 1770, Leopold actually sustained a rather major leg injury.
What happened?
The roads were probably not that good, and so one of the horses got stuck in a pothole that was quite deep with mud and sand, and that caused him to fall heavily to one side. So Leopold instinctively reached over to protect Wolfgang that he wouldn't go flying from the carriage, and in so doing, badly gashed his leg.
And what did Wolfer think about all the traveling?
What we know from his letters, he absolutely loved it. Remember, in those days, many children were actually forced to take jobs that required them to do hard labor. For Wolfgang, traveling was not work. It was an excitement. It was probably the highlight of his young life because he saw incredible places, met wonderful people, and saw new cultures. And what he especially loved was when they could drive fast in the carriage.
Typical kid. But what did he do all those hours on the road?
Oh, it was like a classroom on wheels. Leopold made sure that both Wolfgang and Maria Anna did their school studies. And then Mozart also had a portable keyboard that both he and Nana were able to practice on while in the carriage. And then, of course, when they were finished with all their homework and all their practicing and their musical studies, they had time to have fun because Wolfgang was a master in more than 30 card games, which they played often together as a family in the carriage rides. And then he and Maria Anna also dreamed up their own imaginary world, the Kingdom of Bach.
They must have seen incredible places.
For sure. They visited all of the major German and Italian cities. They visited Paris, they visited London, and also the places where they performed. These were not just any old places, you know. They performed in Versailles for King Louis XV, and they also performed in Buckingham House for King George III, so you can get an idea of the places they went.
Making it to London in those days must have been very complicated.
Indeed, and the Channel crossing in April of 1764 was quite a sensation.
How did they manage it?
Leopold hired a boat and found 4 other paying passengers to help offset the cost. And the journey itself was not a problem, but what was a problem is that the entire Mozart family got terribly seasick. And Leopold actually wrote home to his friend Lorenz Hagenauer that he had become a champion at vomiting.
Did they stay long in England after journeying so far?
They did. They stayed 15 months, but it was not actually out of choice. They stayed because Leopold got deathly ill with a throat infection, and they actually thought for some time that he may not recover. But luckily he did. However, in order to get better, the doctor prescribed silence. And this was interesting because Wolfgang, being the innovative kid that he was, decided to use the time to compose not only his London Notebook, but also his First Symphony. And because of this silence that the doctor had prescribed for Papa, Wolfgang did it all in his head.
Amazing.
It is amazing, and over the course of this 3-year journey, Wolfgang really grew up a lot, and he developed incredibly as a composer. Unfortunately, a lot of his compositions from this time have been lost, but those that do remain, like the violin sonatas, are real masterworks of a budding genius.
The journeys were worth all the challenges. Wolfgang didn't have to be told about the world, he saw it.
That's right, it was an incredible gift for him, and it really gave him a knowledge of the world far beyond his years. So in many ways, it was like a fairy tale. Also, Mr. Winter, das Fiaker-Unternehmen Ihrer Familie besteht schon seit fast 100 Jahren.
Genau, also ich bin jetzt die 3. Generation. Mein Großvater hat 1924 angefangen, also wir machen das schon einige Jahre.
Das ist lange Zeit.
Ja.
Also die Mozart-Familie haben eigentlich eine eigene Kutsche gehabt. War das damals üblich, eine eigene Kutsche zu haben?
Nein, normalerweise nicht. Also normalerweise ist es so, die Kutschen sind als Postkutschen angemietet worden und nachher hat man einfach den Weg gehabt von A nach B, wo die Leute transportiert worden sind. Natürlich, Mozart ist sehr viel auf Reisen unterwegs gewesen und da war es einfach sinnvoll, dass er eine eigene Kutsche hat, weil er hat ja damals sein eigenes Klavier hat er in der Kutsche nachher drinnen gehabt. Das ist extra angepasst worden, die Kutsche dafür, und darum haben sie eine eigene Kutsche für Mozart gehabt, die was nur für ihn zur Verfügung gestellt worden ist, wo er auch drinnen arbeiten hat können, auf Deutsch gesagt.
Okay. Wie haben dann die Mozarts Pferde für die Kutsche gefunden? Gab es immer Pferde zu vermieten oder haben die Pferde vorbestellt? Oder
ja, es hat so ausgeschaut. Also Mozart hat seine eigene Kutsche gehabt und man muss sich das so vorstellen wie heutzutage, wenn wir zum Autoverleiher Rent-a-Car gehen. So hat es damals mit den Pferden. Es waren eigentlich Postkutschpferde. Wenn Mozart auf Reisen gegangen ist, in der Innenstock, wenn er nicht weit gereist ist, ist er mit 2 Pferden gefahren. Für längere Reisen sind dann 4 Pferde verwendet worden. Und für die ganze lange Reise, wo er 3,5 Jahre unterwegs gewesen ist, ist er mit 6 Pferden gereist. Das heißt, sie sind am Tag so circa zwischen 40 und 60 Kilometer gefahren. Okay. Dann sind sie zu einer Poststelle gekommen. Bei dieser Poststelle sind nachher die Pferde gewechselt worden. Mozart hat auch dort dann geschlafen und nachher sind am nächsten Tag andere Pferde wieder verwendet worden.
Und könnten Sie dann auch nachts fahren?
Sie sind auch nachts gefahren. Also sie sind teilweise, je nachdem wie die Wetterverhältnisse sind oder wo sie gefunden sind, natürlich in Wäldern nicht, aber auf hübsch freien Landstraßen sind sie auch in der Nacht dann gereist. Natürlich war es ein großes Risiko, weil man war nachher nicht so für Überfälle und so weiter, also das war relativ gefährlich in der Nacht zu reisen.
Okay. Und wie schnell könnten die fahren?
Naja, heute sind wir, sage ich mal, zwischen 10 und 14 km/h unterwegs. Früher war es so mit den Kutschen und mit den Wegen und mit den Straßen zwischen 6 und Maximum 8 bis 9 km/h, was sie unterwegs gewesen sind. Okay. Also wie gesagt, so Tagesreise zwischen 30 und 60 Kilometer, dann ist Schluss gewesen, also dann ist aus nichts mehr gegangen.
Also beschreiben Sie, wie eine Kutsche wie die von Mozart ausgeschaut könnte.
Natürlich, so wie die Kutsche jetzt ist, war sie nicht. Mozart hat keine offene Kutsche gehabt, also Mozart ist immer mit einer geschlossenen Kutsche gereist. Okay. Aber wir können da schnell zumachen, dann sieht man ungefähr, wie es ausgesehen hat.
Okay.
Ja, es war so eine Reisekutsche, die war komplett überdacht und natürlich ist man bei jedem Wetter gefahren, ob Schönwetter, ob Regen, ob Sturm, ob Schneid, bei jeder Jahreszeit, und die Kutsche war einfach zu. Natürlich war die Kutsche gut gefedert, aber das Problem war einfach damals die Straßenverhältnisse, die Holzräder, also zum Reisen war es sicher nicht angenehm. Also Mozart und seine Familie haben sicher einige blaue Flecken bei der Reise davongetragen.
Ah, wirklich? Okay.
Ja.
Und wie haben Sie eigentlich sich warm gehalten im Winter?
Naja, es waren damals, also wie gesagt, an und für sich relativ viel Kleidung haben sie anhaben müssen und viele Decken in der Kutsche drinnen. Es sind noch so Petroleumlampen sind innen gehangen, aber das natürlich wärmen die nicht, aber einfach mit vielen Decken noch.
Also hatten Sie die ganze Reise denselben Kutscher?
Also was man herausliest aus dem Ganzen, dass immer der gleiche Kutscher gewesen ist. Weil Mozart Vater wollte eine vertraute Person, wo er weiß, dass das Ganze funktioniert. Da ist auch abgesprochen worden, wo die Reise hingeht. Natürlich, wenn der, sage ich mal, 3,5 Jahre unterwegs ist, ist schon einmal gewechselt worden. Aber Mozart hat eigentlich seinen eigenen Kutscher gehabt, der sich um das Wohl von Mozart gesorgt hat. Auch, dass die Kutsche alles perfekt ist und auch gekümmert hat um die Pferde.
Okay, und dann oben waren die Gepäck?
Oben ist noch ein Gepäck gewesen, was aufgelagert worden ist, und alles, was Mozart an Equipment mitgehabt hat, ist auf dem Dach oder hinter der Kutsche dann transportiert worden.
Ach so, okay. Und das war alles dann Holz auch bei Mozart?
Nein, das war auch Leder. Also das war damals schon Leder. Man hat aber so eine Art Rahmen um die Kutsche gehabt, wo so ein Gepäcksträger oben gewesen ist. Und da ist noch das ganze schwere Material transportiert worden.
Also, vielen herzlichen Dank, das war sehr interessant, und vielleicht können wir noch ein bisschen weiterreisen, aber wahrscheinlich offen, weil es ist schon warm heute.
Natürlich nutzen wir das schöne Wetter aus und machen die Kutsche wieder auf.
Okay, so.
Servus.
Servus.